Hello, hello. What's up, everyone? It's Mike D. While everyone's kind of still coming in, I'm going to do a little jamming to get things started. What's up, everyone? Happy Sunday. This is Mike Deary from Rock Guitar Power and Super Guitar Licks. Welcome. I think we got a really good feed and got all this technology stuff figured out, I think. Getting close anyways. Let me know if you guys could hear me and see me okay. Getting started right on time, which is nice today. And hopefully everyone's doing good out there. So just doing a little jamming along. If you get a chance, someone type into that chat box there and let me know if you could hear me and see me okay. And I want to make sure everything's looking and sounding good before we really dig into all the fun stuff that we have to talk about today. Okay, so everybody, what is up? So today we are going to be talking about, cool. All right, Dave, yeah, everything sounding good? I think we're good to go. Cool, so all good, awesome. Thanks, Steve. Okay, sweet. So welcome everybody. And today I'm really excited to talk about one of my favorite topics for teaching guitar, and that is understanding relative major and minor. And what that relationship is, and why is it so powerful for guitar players. I was thinking about calling this lesson how to use one scale for everything you want to jam on, because that's essentially what we're going to be learning how to do. So whenever someone hears about any music theory, especially if you haven't studied it, you don't really know about it, it's kind of this murky gray area that kind of scares a bunch of people. But it shouldn't, because it's super powerful, and you don't need to know much theory concepts, especially as a guitar player, to open up a lot of doors and give you a lot of abilities to do things that aren't as hard as you might think. So what am I talking about? We want to know where, when we jam, solo, improvise, or write music, even if it's writing melodies to a song that we wrote, if we want to jam and improvise, we always want to know where we could do that for our any given song, whether it's a song that we're writing or whether it's a song that we're learning. And the big concept here is that we're going to be learning how to use that good old minor pentatonic scale, the king of all guitar scales, for pretty much any song that you listen to. So our minor pentatonic scale, let me bring that guy up here, which hopefully if you've played guitar for any amount of time, you're going to recognize this pattern because it is just the king of all guitar scales, all right? So this scale pattern is just used over everything. You know, any rock solo, any classic solo, any, folk solo, even jazz stuff, you could use this over. It is so useful that we always want to know where we could use this scale for any given song that we're working on, because it's always home base. Now, the big kicker here is that the name of the scale is, of course, the minor pentatonic scale. And what happens if a song you're learning or writing or jamming on is not in minor? That's the big question. A lot of people and a lot of students have come to me when they get a certain level of proficiency and they learn this scale and they learn that a song is, hey, we're in A minor, so that if I play this scale and I start it on A, I know it's going to work and sound good. But what happens if someone says, hey, we're going to jam in D major? Or you find out that the song you want to learn is in D major. At that point, a lot of people kind of freak out because they're like, what do I do? How do I jam over that? Because I've only learned this one scale and I don't know where to use it. So this is where the concept of relative major and minor come into play, all right? So, of course, understanding more theory will unlock more things to you as a guitar player and just as a musician. But this scale is so popular and so useful that no matter what, you always first want to know where you could use it for any given song. Because so many of the licks, phrases, and repetitive patterns that we learn as guitar players when we learn other solos or just learn licks are usually based within this pattern. And it always sounds good. So, what is this concept of relative major and minor? So there is, so if I kind of take this one down here, there is a section of rock guitar power here. Oops, let me get out of this. This was what I was jamming to. We'll get to this in a minute. So if we go on rock guitar power, there is, in our guitar courses, a course called the Intro to Songwriting course, all right? And this is going to be a very light theory course that is going to introduce this concept. And there's a lesson here called Harmonic Structure. And this essentially is a lesson that's going to talk about this whole relationship between relative, major, and minor. So here's the idea. Every single major key has a relative minor key that shares the exact same notes. All right, I'll say that again. Every major key has a relative minor key that shares the exact same notes. And it's vice versa. Every minor key has what's called a relative major, has the exact same notes. And let's keep it all simple. We're going to talk about C major or A minor, okay? No, if you're looking at a piano, there's no black keys if you're in the key of C major or A minor, all right? So if we take a C major, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then C. All right? So if we have a chord progression that uses C major chords, then what we could do is use an A minor scale pattern to jam over it, because essentially we're playing the exact same notes. Okay? It's pretty much as simple as that. You don't want to read into it or don't have to read into it more than that. A lot of times when people think about theory things or they really want to try to wrap their heads around it, they almost think too hard. And this is one of those concepts that you really don't want to think too hard about. The main idea is to know that if a song is in a major key it has a relative minor that shares the exact same notes. All right. In this case, we're in C major. So if I say, hey, we're going to jam in C major, no problem. Instead of freaking out and saying, man, I don't really know my major scale that well, what I do know is my minor pentatonic scale really well. So if someone says, hey, we're going to jam on C major, I could think to myself as a guitar player, okay, C major, what's the relative minor? A minor. And I'll tell you a trick how to figure it out real easy in a second. So if I'm playing something in C major as the chord progression, and then I jam an A minor scale, it's going to work great. So for example, let me lay down a quick chord progression on C here. So if I just jam on, I'm just going to play a C chord and loop it with my looping pedal. All right, so we have a C chord. So the idea now is to play an A minor pentatonic scale over top of this. So we're going to start at the 5th fret and play A minor pentatonic. All right, so you could see how that really sounded good. I'm doing a lot of standard, fun, simple blues and rock licks, and it works great. And I could stay within this pattern that I know really well. And even if you don't know it really well, you will, because it's such a standard and useful pattern, all right? Again, let me bring that scale pattern up. But anyways, if you're on Rock Guitar Power, this harmonic structure course is going to be a good primer and a good way to go even more in depth than what we're going to talk about here. So once again, let me take this screen out, and I'm going to bring back our minor pentatonic scale. At any point, if you guys have questions, write them into the chat and I'll explain more, okay? I got a lot more I'm going to cover here, but at any point, if you have questions, type them into the chat and I'll answer your questions that you have. So if we're looking at our good old minor pentatonic scale, we know that if we're in the key of C major, I'm going to start it on A minor. How do I figure this out easily? So the trick is to always go down 3 frets or 3 half steps from your major key. Okay, this is really, really important. So if I'm in a major key and I know what that note is, so let's say, hey, we're going to play in D major, all right? So what do I need to do first? I need to find the note D. And again, we're going to want to usually get to know the notes on our big string because that's always home base. So I know that if I find the note D, it's going to be at the 10th fret on the big E string. All right? So we have our note D. Now, what do I need to do to find the relative minor? I'm going to go down in pitch, lower in notes, 3 frets. So if I'm on D, I go 1, 2, 3. That's it. That rule will always work on a guitar because it's a stringed instrument and your half steps are always 1 fret. So if I know where my major is and I go down in pitch 3 frets or 3 half steps if you're thinking about a piano, that is going to be the relative minor to your major key. Okay? Again, if anybody has questions on that, let me know, but that's pretty much as simple as we can make it. So let's say, hey, we're going to jam in D, okay? Let's find a song that's in D, all right? I loaded one up already, and what we're going to do is look at the chord progression of Proud Mary, all right? So good old Creedence Clearwater tune, which I think actually was written by somebody else, but they obviously made it, hugely popular, and most people know this song. So anyways, if we look at the chord progression to the verse of Proud Mary, okay, we're definitely in the key of D. So what I'm going to do is play this chord progression and loop it, all right? And what we're going to do is hear how this sounds. So let me first get this loop set up, and we're just going to go ahead and play through this chord progression. So Okay, so we have our loop set up. Now what we're going to do is play on top of this. So first off, what do we do first? We find our note D. It's on the 10th fret on the big string. What do we do next? To find our relative minor, we go down in pitch 3 frets. So we go D, we go down to C sharp, we go to C, and then we find ourselves at B. So B minor is the relative minor to D major. So again, someone says, hey, we're going to jam in D. You don't freak out. You find D, and you go down 3 frets and play your minor pentatonic scale and all the licks that you know really well from it. Even if you only know one, use it, okay? Let's hear how it sounds. All right, cool. So you could see how it brings home that rock sound and fits like a glove. Now, what happens if we play that minor pentatonic scale on the major? Let's give it a listen, okay? I'm not even going to say anything yet. Let me just play this. So what I'm going to do now is play the chord progression, which is in D major, and then I'm going to play a D minor pentatonic scale. All right, check it out. Okay, so immediately if you notice, it does not work as good. Why do I say as good? A lot of people can always come up with the idea that, you know, nothing sounds bad as guitar players. Some things sound bad, all right? Some people are going to say, you know, it just sounds like crap. It doesn't sound like crap when I do that, in my opinion, but it does not sound like everything's working as good. And why? Because there's notes in my chords that are not in the scale that I'm playing. Okay, the basic idea is that for things to sound like they're working and like they want to sound good, the notes that you play in your soloing and lead should be within the chords that are happening in the chord progression. All right? And again, you don't need to understand and think about all that before you start jamming. You just need to know what key you're in, and you need to know where to start your minor pentatonic scale. All right? Again, if anybody has questions on that, let me know. If it makes sense, let me know, and so forth, okay? But what's happening here is that because I'm in D major, but I'm playing a D minor pentatonic scale, there's a couple notes in there that don't fit, that are not within the key signature. And when I hit those notes, they sound off. They don't sound like they're working, okay? However, if I go down 3 steps and play B minor against something in D major, they're all the same notes. So all of my licks and leads are going to sound like they're working and like they sound good and like they sound like I know what I'm doing. And again, you don't really need to know what you're doing to the nth degree. If it sounds good, it sounds good. And this is a way for it always to sound good. Hopefully that makes sense, okay? Let's go ahead and look at a different example, all right? So what we're going to do now is go into a jam on the Guitar Pro Jam. So we're going to go back to Rock Guitar Power here. And what I'm going to do is go into my guitar courses. Oh, and by the way, there's another course here called Jammin' with the Band, which is one of my most favorite courses here because what we did for this was we had a live band that I've worked with and used to play in come into the studio, we recorded them, and then we shot videos and teach you how to play the songs. It's a really fun experience. But one of the songs that we did here is Proud Mary, okay? So there's a full guitar lesson. to teach you how to play all of the chords, and you could jam along to the band, where what we did was in the final video here at the bottom, we muted out the guitar player. So you could learn the parts, play along to it. It's super fun. But anyways, one of the reasons why I brought up Proud Mary is because we do teach this song in this course. So check it out. It's a ton of fun to jam to. But what I'm going to do now is go over to our Guitar Pro Jam. All right? One of my other favorite courses here, because it's all about teaching you how to jam and solo, which most people really love doing. So Pro Jam number 10 is called the 2-5 Jam. And what this is it's a standard but very simple jazz progression. I am by no means a jazz player, and I do not attest to be one at all. But there is one very simple concept in jazz as far as being one of the most famous chord progressions that happen a lot. If you're playing the blues, the most famous chord progression in blues is, of course, the 12-bar blues. All right? In jazz, 2-5 is a very popular chord progression. And what do we mean by 2-5? Well, if we're in the key of, let's say, A major, A is 1, B is 2, right? C is 3, or C sharp is 3. Then we have D, E. So E is going to be the 5. So if we're in A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I play an A major scale, 1, 2, B is 2, and E is 5. So the 2-5 is in relation to the number chord in the sequence. If we go back to our harmonic structure image here, okay, what harmonic structure does is that it builds a chord on each step of a scale. Okay? If I'm getting too deep into the theory, just let me know. If it all makes sense, let me know. So if we look at A major, okay, again, this current screen is in C major or A minor. But let's say we're in A major. What we're going to do is look at the chord progression 2-5, okay? And we're going to use 7th chords because that gives it a little bit more of a bluesy sound. Or I'm sorry, a jazzy sound. So what we have is a B minor 7. All right, the chord shape's right up there on the screen. Hopefully you can see it. And then what we're going to do is go to an E7 chord. So this is 2-5. The overall thing to know is that we're in the key of A major, okay? So while I'm working out this jam and getting a loop going, does anybody want to guess what key? What is the relative minor to A major? See if someone could guess it and type it in the chat there. But what I want to do is just establish my groove. And on Rock Guitar Power here, what we have is the jam tracks. So I don't even need to loop this. I could just play my jam track here, which is playing these two chords back and forth, B minor and E7. All right, 2-5. But again, the thing to know is that we are in the key of A major, okay? Patrick, should you focus on the major note C in the A minor scale? That is an awesome question, and I'm glad you asked it, because it brings up a very good point. And I'll address that when we're soloing here. This is a trick to help you use one scale in one position always, no matter your song. And 90% of the time, it's going to sound and work awesome. But the good point that Patrick brings up and asks is that we are, in this case, if we are in C major, C is the root of the key, and it's also the first chord in the chord progression. Most songs that are in any key signature, yes, awesome, JXE8BV. You got it right. So the relative minor to A major is F sharp minor. Awesome. We'll address that in a second. Back to Patrick's question. So the thing that you do want to try to understand, or the next step into being a better player, is to understand and always keep in mind, what is my root key signature, okay? Because let's say we're in C major, but I'm using an A minor pentatonic scale to jam on top of. If I'm going to end a phrase, and I want it to end where the chord progression begins, to sound like everything's done and finalized, then if I end my lick on the note C, it's gonna sound more tight. It's gonna sound like I really finished it off strong because my song is in the key of C major, not A minor. So it's a great point. And again, that's one next step into understanding the theory of what's going on. If it's too much to think about already, don't worry about it. But if you're ready for that next step, let's take a look at that in this jam, okay? So first what we have is our chord progression, B minor, E7, okay? We could also add an A major 7 and a D major 7 to mix it up. We'll do that later. Right now, here's our groove. And again, we're in A major, which is interesting because we're not even touching an A major chord, okay? But regardless of that, if we know we're in A major and we want to figure out where we use our minor pentatonic scale, okay? What do? We go to A and we go down 3 frets, all right? And what note are we on? F sharp. Awesome. So if I let this groove play, what we're going to do is use an F sharp minor pentatonic scale to jam on top of it. All right, let's hear how it sounds. So hear how good that sounds? Everything's locking tight. Everything sounds really good. And now, just for an example, what happens if we now play an A minor pentatonic scale when we're in the key of A major using these chords? Again, let's listen to hear how this sounds. So what I'm going to do now, instead of playing F sharp minor pentatonic, I'm going to play A minor pentatonic. So that right there, you could say close enough to jazz or close enough for jazz, but let's be honest, what sounds better? Playing A minor pentatonic or F sharp minor pentatonic, all right? The F sharp minor pentatonic is gonna fit a lot better because again, what we're doing is essentially using the same notes in our soloing that exist in the chords that are being played in our progression, all right? The other thing that's interesting about this chord progression is that because we're using 7th chords, okay, we got B minor 7 and E7. The only thing you need to know about those 2 chords is that there's 4 notes in them each, okay? Before, when we were looking at Proud Mary, there's only 3 notes in a major chord, the root, the 3rd, and the 5th. With the 7th chords we're playing, we have the root, the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th. Because there's 4 notes in a chord, there's now more notes that I need to worry about that line up when I pick a scale to use. So that means that if I don't play the correct scale, more notes that I play in my soloing is going to sound off. There's going to be a lot more chances for me to sound like I'm not knowing what I'm doing because there's a lot more notes that clash that aren't in my chord progression that are in my soloing. Okay? Again, you don't need to think about all that. Know that that's what's happening. All you need to think about is saying, hey, I'm in a major key. Where's my minor pentatonic that I know so well? Where can I play it? I go 3 frets down from my minor pentatonic, okay? And now I always got my home base. Now, let's go back to what we were talking about earlier with Patrick's question about the root note. We are in A major, okay? So if I end my phrase on A, it's going to sound like it connects more. What's interesting about this chord progression, not to get even more technical, is that the actual first chord I play is a B minor 7, all right? So if I end my soloing lick on an F sharp, which again is our minor pentatonic, or a relative minor, let's hear how it sounds. All right, so I'm going to play this chord, the backing track, and I'm going to jam to it. I'm going to do a couple licks and end on an F sharp. Okay, if you could hear at the end there, I kept playing F sharp. At no point did that F sharp sound like it was done. It didn't sound like I could take a breath. And again, that's an important thing to remember as a guitar player. You gotta do things that allow you to breathe. We have the luxury of not needing to breathe. Well, we need to breathe. We don't need to breathe to play our instrument in the sense of a saxophone player or horn player. But you gotta remember to take breaths when you're phrasing. But the F sharp never really connected, okay, because it's not the root of what we're doing. Let's try that with the root, okay? Okay, so if you notice, I kept playing A a lot, whether it was this note here or this A. Okay, they're both the same note. And again, it still didn't really hit home like it was sounding awesome. Why is that? Because the first chord is a B minor, okay? So let's see what happens when we do some phrases and end on the note B, all right? Here we go. Okay, so it locks in a little bit better. This is not the best example for this. We'll check out one more. But the idea is that if you can mentally think about it, when you're ready to end a lick or a phrase, a soloing phrase, if you can visualize and know where the root of your key is, try to get to that note at the end of your phrase, all right? It'll probably sound a lot better. So it is, again, it's a great, great question. I'm glad you asked that, all right? Patrick, again, can you use these notes as passing notes? You absolutely certainly can. And it's a good point. Passing note is just, your note to kind of move into the ending of a phrase or whatever. A great example of a good passing tone is always a blue note. So if I were to use a blues scale, I never want to hang on this note. It's very tense. It's got a lot of tension. But if I use it as a passing note, it sounds really good. It sounds tight, all right? So passing notes are it's always great to use the relative minor note as a passing note. And if you could visualize it, think about where that root of your key is. That is what's really going to sound like home base when you're finishing a phrase, all right? Let's take another example. If anybody has any other questions on that, let me know, okay? So let's get out of the jazz mode here, and what we're going to do is look at another one, Bobby McGee by Janis Joplin, okay? So this is another great folk song, fun, old school rock, folk song, however you want to kind of call it. Really popular tune, and it's certainly in a major key, all right? Now this one starts in the key of G, and it modulates after the first verse into the key of A major, all right? So what we're looking at is the chord progression for the soloing section or the verse, all right? So if we look at this chord progression, oops, let's get off that. And let's get in tune. How's everything looking and sounding? Good, you guys? I think we got this technology thing down good, which I'm glad about. Okay, so if we look at our chord progression, Okay, so there's our chord progression. We have it looped. So now is an example where we're still in the same key that we were in our previous jam. We're in the key of A major. But now, as you can see, this chord progression really focuses on that A. It begins on A and it ends on A. So now what we're going to do is the same exact thing. We're going to practice in F sharp minor. So let's just go ahead and use our F sharp minor pentatonic scale and see how it sounds. And by the way, the other thing that's nice about something like F sharp minor is that it's very easy to access on the 2nd fret on the big string. But if I want to go up the octave, we can get up here to the 14th fret. And this is also an F sharp. I don't have to change anything with my patterns. It's an octave up, and it's got that higher soloing range that we like to play in. So if I play up here, I could jam both positions. And both are going to sound really good, and it's going to give me a big chunk of the neck to use. But I'm still just doing the same thing. I'm using one pattern that I know really, really well, and I'm playing it in 2 different places. All right? So check it out. We're going to go ahead and let the chord progression play and use our F sharp minor pentatonic to jam on top of it. Okay, so if you noticed, what I did at the end there was I made sure I ended on the note A. And that's when you could hear things really connect and sound like I'm done soloing, like I sound like I'm meant to be finished. That is because, we're in the key of A major, and when I stop on the note A in my licks and my soloing, it's connecting with the root of the chord, and it's connecting with the first chord in the progression and the last chord, and it sounds like it really connects. If I do that same thing, but I end on F sharp, okay, the root of my scale, it doesn't sound quite like home. Okay, check it out. See, there's tension. Okay, now we're on the E. When we get to that A, things sound like they work a lot better. So again, that's the next step in understanding this concept and being able to master it, is to say, I know I'm going to use my minor pentatonic scale, but where in that scale pattern is my major notes, my relative major notes, okay? If you can figure those out, it'll give you one new tool to kind of rely on so that you'll sound that much better and that much more polished, okay? But again, the whole concept that I wanted to bring up here is the idea that understanding relative major and minor will really help you know where you could always jam on any given song. The only thing this really doesn't work great on is like real jazz stuff, you know, deeper jazz that has a lot more chord changes and a lot more dense chords. Because of the nature of the notes in the chords and the movement of the progressions, jazz is one of those styles of music where you really want to solo for the particular change that's happening, or solo for the chord. All right, it's one style of music where using one scale in one position doesn't usually work great. Just about anything else that most people like listening to, this works awesome. Classical is another example where it's not going to really work that great, but we don't really very often grab our electric guitar and jam on top of classical music. Yngwie does, and of course that's a whole different story, but we won't go there. So again, if you guys have questions or need further information on that, let me know. Question in from Steve. So are you playing only minor pentatonic notes? Are you adding an extra note sometimes when you play triplets? Great question. So the only thing I'm really adding into this is maybe a blue note here and there. So if I'm using the blues scale, So we have, let's throw up our blues scale here. So we showed our minor pentatonic scale earlier, right? If we show our blues scale that we have here, this is a way to add that one extra note. So if you're looking at this pattern, you got a note in the square, okay? The circled notes are going to be the root notes to my key signature, all right? The note that we'll see in our square here is going to have the blue note. So in other words, so if I add in a little note here and there, one of the notes that I like to add in is my blue note. And it works great because I could still use this pattern, use it in the same position, but now I got more of a bluesy sound, all right? Let me go ahead and play it and you'll hear what I mean. So if you use that as an example, that might be something I throw in there. But for the most part, everything else I'm playing is just this minor pentatonic scale. The one thing that I might be doing a little bit is sliding into the major pentatonic scale, all right? And this is one other concept, again, to take the simple idea and add one new layer of it to give you more options and to give you more things to play. So we've been talking this whole lesson about relative major and minor. The whole point of the lesson was to teach you how to use what we always know and what we've started probably from day one learning was that relative or that minor pentatonic scale. There is, of course, a major pentatonic scale, all right? Again, next level here, if we go into I don't think I have the short thing of it here. So let's go back into Rock Guitar Power. And what we're going to look at is, let's go back to our screen capture. You guys liking the screen capture, by the way? I was really excited to finally get this dialed in so I could go to the website and show you more resources so that, again, when we get off this lesson, you guys know where you can kind of dive into the website to get more advanced training on this, okay? So if we go into volume 2, I think it's volume 2. Let's double check here. So this, if one of the lessons is your first solo lick, this is a good one to start. If you guys are just starting out, check out lesson 1 in volume 2. It's going to teach you a lick that you could use over any of this stuff, okay? So we got our major and minor scales. That's not quite what I wanted. I'm not sure if I do the major pentatonic in here, actually. Actually, I think that's part of soloing and lead playing. So if we go to soloing and lead playing, this is a course that's going to teach all the pentatonic patterns. And just to keep this simple, okay, here is the lesson number 2 in the soloing and lead playing program. This is going to be our good old major pentatonic pattern. So just like you have minor pentatonic, the relative major, this is the pattern that we know and want to learn. So if we keep with the song we're working on here, instead of shifting to the relative minor, what's even better, to be perfectly honest, is to use the major scale associated with your major key. All right, so here it is in front of us. We got our major pentatonic scale. So let's try this out. I'm going to play my progression, or here's the scale first off in A. And you can hear how when I finish that, it really sounds done. It sounds like I finished my line, okay? So let's play the progression and use this to jam on it. Okay, you can hear how when I ended that phrase and that chord changed back to A, everything really sounded tight and like it was really meant to be. Because again, my root of my scale, the first note of the scale, is lining up with the root chord and the chord that's being played at that given time. That's going to sound really good and tight. So the first scale that we always pretty much learn is that minor pentatonic scale. A great second scale is the major pentatonic. Again, if I play my major pentatonic, in this case on A, and then I play my F sharp minor pentatonic scale, I'm playing the exact same notes. That's it. That's all you got to really understand. The idea, though, is that, I'm starting and ending them on a different note. If I play F sharp minor pentatonic, I'm playing and beginning on F sharp. If I play a major pentatonic, I'm starting and ending on A. But all the notes in between are the same exact notes. So of course they'll all work on top of my chord progression that's in that given key. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a lot of talking, but with the examples I'm bringing up, hopefully it makes sense. So one of the best exercises that I teach people to kind of now open up the fretboard more than being in just that minor pentatonic pattern is to play and learn the major pentatonic. And just like we talked about earlier in the lesson, how do you find it? You go up 3 half steps. So if I know where my minor pentatonic scale works, I can come up 3 frets, and this is where I would start my major pentatonic pattern. And what I could do is go down the minor pentatonic, in other words, from the big string to the little string, and then come back using the major pentatonic. Check it out. All right? I played the same exact notes going down that I did up. They were in a little bit different order, but all the notes were the same. And what I did now was I improved the amount of, I got more of the guitar neck to use when I solo, because now I know that I could use the notes here in that pattern, but now I also have these extra notes in the major pentatonic pattern, and that allows me to open up more of the fretboard. So I went on that whole tangent because, Steve, to your question, the other thing that I do a lot is if I play the minor pentatonic scale and I get to the last couple strings, I slide up into the major pentatonic. Why does it work? Because it's the exact same notes. The same concept we've been talking about this whole time. So if we could learn this major pentatonic, and you understand the concept of relative major and minor, you now have opened up the fretboard to using 2 scales in 2 different places. And again, the whole great beauty thing about this is, as a guitar player, you do not need to know every single note name that you're playing. If you're a saxophone player, if you're a trumpet player, if you're any horn player, you don't have repetitive patterns that you do on the guitar. You actually need to understand and think about, oh my God, we're in F sharp minor. Okay, what notes are in the key of F sharp minor? I got to know that. I got to know F sharp, A, B, D, E, and then F sharp. And then I got to know where all those notes are when I play. And you could already see how complex that gets. There's so much more thinking that goes on in that. As a guitar player, we have this huge advantage to say, I know my scale pattern, and I know where to start that pattern. And I know whatever I play within that pattern, everything is going to sound good. No reason why to make it any more difficult, okay? So many famous guitar players, openly said they really don't understand what they're doing in a lot of ways. They don't understand theory. It just sounds good. And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. And it's also what's going to matter for you to start having fun right away. Because if you approach the instrument thinking that you need to know everything that you're doing, it's going to be too confusing. You're going to get overwhelmed. Throw all that out and just say, where can I play something simple and have it sound good? And that's what this concept really helps you do. All right? You got it, Steve. No problem. Great question. Let's see. Patrick, I like using the minor chord to bend up to when playing in the major key. Beautiful. That's awesome. So, and that's a perfect example. So if we take our minor pentatonic scale, this note right here, okay, in this case, it's a B. That's an example where I take the note, I bend up a whole step, and that's a good example of bending into a note instead of, just playing down the next string and bending into it. It's a similar idea there. That allows you to use the advantage of bendable notes on a stringed instrument to give you a different vocal sound or different sound. So great point, Patrick. I love that. Okay, guys, a lot of theory, a lot of talking, but hopefully that all makes sense. Does anybody have any questions on that? I got one more example to talk about. And what we're going to do is jump out of this guy, and we're going to look at a Beatles tune. That's, of course, one of the best bands, and, you know, they write, this is an example of a band that writes a lot of music in major keys, okay? To be perfectly honest, a lot of songs that are really famous are in minor keys. It just has more energy. It has more interesting sounds in it. It doesn't always need to sound sad, but minor keys really sound cool. They give you the option to do a lot of cool stuff. And so a lot of songs are in minor keys, but there's plenty of songs that are in major keys. And you do not want to be left out or feel like you don't know what you're doing when you get, you know, your hands on a song that's in a major key. So, Hard Day's Night, really fun Beatles tune, a lot more energy. And if we look at this chord progression, what key are we in? We're in the key of G. So while I play this, someone figure this out and type it in. What is the relative minor to G major? Okay, find the note G, go down in pitch 3 half steps or just 3 frets. That is your key that we're going to be using to jam, okay? So let me go ahead and lay this chord progression in. Had to remember the chord progression here. All right, so let's jam. Okay, so we have our chord progression looped. So we're gonna go and start off with our main idea. Anybody know before I talk about, while someone still needs to type this in before I go to the relative minor. In the meantime, what I'm gonna do is use the major like we talked about already, okay? So the major, again, we're in G, so we're gonna play G major pentatonic. Let's hear how that sounds first, okay? Let's go. Antonio wins. He's got it. Great. Thank you for typing that in, buddy. So E minor is going to be a relative minor to G major. In that last example, you could see how when I ended my phrase and I ended it on a G, it really locked tight with my chord progression and sounded good. But let's start off and let's go to using the technique we start off talking about. We're in G major. Our song is in the key of G major. So what are we going to do to use the scale that we know so well? We're going to go down 3 half steps. Here's my G. 1, 2, 3. It's on E. You could do it here too. A lot of times people would be like, well, I ran out of frets. Well, no, you didn't. It's open. In other words, if I have G, I go 1, 2, 3. Open E. Okay? So E minor is the relative minor to G major. So if I in G major, and I play my E minor pentatonic scale, everything's going to sound awesome. Let's hear it. Okay, so Oops, stop. Okay, so if you noticed, when I end that lick, it sounded awesome. Why? Because I ended on the note G. This is an example where I know where my root of my song is inside of this scale pattern, okay? So I'm just kind of hanging and doing some licks and waiting for that last G in the progression to hit so that I could sit there and be... And that's how, again, as a soloist and a lead player just jamming, you're gonna sound like you know like you're doing what you're doing even more, is by connecting with that note and having it really sound like it's tight and fitting with what's going on, okay? So that is the lesson that I had planned. We're coming up on an hour, so it's perfect. If you guys have any other questions, type them in, but thank you so much for being here. Got a good crowd, I had great questions, and I love it. And I'm gonna have the replay of this available up on the site in a day or two, so look out for an email there. Actually, another quick question. So the sixth note in the scale is always, yes, exactly. So great question, Patrick. So if I've been talking about going down from the major, okay? If you start on the root and you go up, the minor, the relative minor is the sixth note. So if we keep it simple and start in C, okay? And we go C, D, E, F, G, A. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth note up from the root of the major is the relative minor. Awesome. The same idea is that if I go down in pitch 3 half steps, it's the same note, okay? And that's just easier because it's closer, okay? If I know, hey, I'm in C major, boom, here's C, I know I could just go 1, 2, 3. And there you go. It's simple. It's so close that most people don't even realize how close it is. Sixth note, it's exactly the same note. You're just going up and you got a lot more steps to get to that sixth note. But yes, you are absolutely correct. The sixth note in a major scale is going to be the root note that's the relative minor. Okay? Great clarification. I'm glad you brought that up. So get out there, find some songs to jam on that are in major keys. Purposely seek out some major keys. You know, you could just type in, you know, what songs are in major keys, or find some songs that you really love that just sound happy. It's a good way to know that it's in a major key. Overall, if the song's happy and joyful, probably in a major key. And use this whole concept to try to jam along to it, all right? The other thing, just a couple other quick notes too. Rock Guitar Power, the monthly membership is $9.95. It's gone down a whole bunch. So if you're not a member, jump in there and take advantage of it, all right? We got access to all these courses. A lot of the courses that I showed, let me bring up this thing here one more time. We'll bring up our screen capture. Get rid of this guy. So a lot of these courses that I brought up in this lesson are definitely part of our paid membership if you're not already a paid member. So to get access to them all, you know, again, check out the membership, $9.95 a month. You can get there from the homepage. You'll always see, if you're logged out, a button to kind of join, or you can check out this link here, all about the different programs, and that'll get you the link to get signed up as a full member with full access to everything. The thing that's really awesome to check out, again, some of the resources here, Jamming with the Band is where we have Proud Mary and a bunch of other tunes as well. There's the other one that's Little by Little, a blues tune, and then Bring It On Home from Zeppelin, or the Zeppelin version of it, and then He Gotta Go, which is an original tune by the band Tegan and the Tweeds that I brought in to do this program with, all right? And then the other thing is that Guitar Pro Jam. There's so many great examples of this, and within the Pro Jam, the whole idea is that I teach specific licks and specific solos that you could do over the chord progressions that are in here, okay? So when you're inside of something like this, you could see that within the Pro Jam, I'm going to teach you how to play specific licks that go along to the chord progressions that these are made from, all right? And this is going to help you extend your knowledge of this and implement it, all right? And then, of course, we always have our backing tracks. So if I'm up here and I go to backing tracks, all right, this is going to give us tons of free backing tracks. Even if you're not a paid member, this is one of those free assets that's on the site. So come in here. Every backing track tells you what key it's in and where to start your minor pentatonic scale. But see if you could, most of these are actually in minor. I got to get some major jams up here, to be honest. But this 2-5 jam is on here, okay? So, and again, we talk about it being an A major, but see if you could come here, play this backing track, and then jam along in the relative minor, okay? Great, you got it. Thanks, Everett. All right, everyone, thank you so much for being on here. Go have an awesome day. Go play some guitar and enjoy. And I can't wait to see you guys soon. Again, I'm really loving these live lessons, and I'm going to be doing a lot more of them on a more steady basis. Really glad that I got this this whole setup dialed in, and it's only going to get better. So cheers, guys. Have fun, and we'll talk to you soon. Later.